What's going on, YouTube? Today we return. Week off because my editing software was down, but we're back. And today we are jumping into my number 12 power rank team for the 2021 NFL season. And once we finish up these power rankings, there's going to be a lot of different types of content coming out. So if you have any suggestions, go ahead and let me know below. Wow, we're back with the no talking already. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any video suggestions. I already got one, so that's great to have. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, starting off the receiving room, and one thing I want to state before I even get into this is that, yes, I am aware that 12 is a lot higher than most people are on Washington. However, I do believe that if you took away the quarterback position, this is the most talented roster in the NFL. That is above the Buccaneers. Again, if you took away quarterback, even without a quarterback, I still think they're up there because obviously they're at number 12. But with this receiving room, you have a third-year player here with Terry McLaurin, who looks to have a very, very bright future. He's a great go-up-and-get-it type guy, which is why Ryan Fitzpatrick is such a good fit for him. So I really like that. Terry McLaurin, you can expect a big year from him. And there's some really good depth here. You don't really have anyone even close to as good as Terry McLaurin here. Curtis Samuel, inconsistent, but he is a good, slot depth guy, or not depth, slot go down and get it guy, downfield. But still a lot of other solid players here. Steven Sims played really solid in the playoffs last year. Well, the playoff game. They picked up Dyami Brown, who's a really solid slot guy, but can play elsewhere. Antonio Gandy-Golden has a lot of potential as well. Cam Sims is decent depth. Adam Humphries is really good depth. Dax Milne is a very solid young receiver. So while you don't have, and I haven't even talked about Kelvin Harmon, who is also a solid depth receiver, while you have one guy here who I'm expecting a big year from him, probably his best yet, maybe no one else here that's as close to good as him, but you do have some fantastic young depth here. So this is a very good receiving room, and it's going to get an A-. It's a very good receiving room. Left tackle, you brought in Charles Leno from the Bears. That was great. That was a bit of an upgrade over, what you had last year, obviously. Not Trent Williams by any means, but, he's Charles Leno. So he's a solid enough tackle. I feel like Sam Cosmi is probably going to be on that right tackle spot. So in that case, you don't really have anyone to back up. Maybe you move one of the other tackles over to the left side. Sadiq Charles probably moving into guard. So, Charles Leno as his own guy, he makes up a solid enough tackle. He's good, and that's good enough to get you a B- for that room. Left guard, you're starting Eric Flowers, which you brought back over from Miami, who was an upgrade for sure over, who was it starting? I think it was Wes Schweitzer, is how I'm saying. That's probably wrong. It is an upgrade over him, who I believe was starting last year. I can't remember exactly who was, but it was, it's obviously still a tiny upgrade. He's not the best starter in the world, obviously. Like I said, Sadiq Charles moving over to guard. I always like Sadiq Charles. I think he still holds a lot of upside, and I think he does fit that guard mold a bit better than tackle, even though I do think he played tackle at LSU, so I do like that move at least. And, as your third or second guy or wherever you play him, again, Schweitzer, if I'm saying that right, Schweitzer is a solid depth guy. I don't really know who Tyler Larson is, to be honest, but you do have a meh starter, maybe on the edge of meh, with a young guy with a lot of potential behind him and a really solid number 3/2. So, it's really meh to me right now, but because there's that upside, I am going to give it a C+. At center, Chase Roulier, unless it's Chase Roulier, again, Washington fans, you got to let me know about this. Chase Roulier, I'm going to say Chase Roulier, is actually a really solid starter. He's one of the more underrated players, or underrated centers in the NFL, so he's really solid. Keith Ismail is a nice, depth piece there. Same with Ben Zweischel. Yeah, I don't know. Some interesting names here. But regardless, you have a really solid starter. He's good. He's not solid. He's good. With two really good backups as well. So that's going to get you a B+ for this room. Roulier got himself a nice contract extension. At right guard, you worry a bit about the future just because, Sheriff is on his his last year, with the franchise tag, and they've not really worked out any future contract talks. But for the time being, Brandon Sheriff is in my opinion, a top 3 guard in the NFL. No, scratch that, top 4. And he, to me, is a top 5 offensive lineman, inside offensive lineman. Brandon Sheriff, he's dominant. He's a fantastic run blocker. He's by far and away the best player on this line. He's dominant, one of the best in the business, so that's obviously great to have. And Wes Martin makes up for a decent backup behind him, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, you have one of the best interior guys in the NFL starting for you there, so that is going to get you an A. And then at right tackle, probably starting Cornelius Lucas right now, who I also was always a bit of a fan of. I think he also holds that upside and potential. But they drafted Sam Cosmi, who that was kind of a strange pick to me, but the more I look at it, the more I like it. I do think he fits the system here with Washington, and I think he's your right tackle of the future, to be honest. He's unless you want to have him be the future for Leno, because I think Leno's only on a 1-year deal. Either way, Cosmi, I'm going to put him at right side for right now, does hold a lot of potential. No one behind him. David Sharp is whatever. But you do have a really solid young depth player there, and a guy that, again, is also a young depth guy, really. So you don't have the best starter in the world over here, but you do have an upside with 2 different guys here. So it's going to get a D+ for right now, but there's definitely a lot of potential with those 2. At tight end, Logan Thomas, to me, was pretty underrated last year, to be honest. He was actually really solid for Washington. Some people have him as a breakout candidate, and I kind of look at it as like he kind of broke out already, unless you're projecting him to have like an incredible season, which I don't. But he is a solid tight end. I think he did kind of break out last year. They brought over Ricky Seals-Jones, who is a really solid guy to have as your 2 probably. And then they drafted John Bates out of Boise, and that was a fine enough pickup. I'm pretty sure he was out of Boise. Was a fine enough pickup. You have a solid tight end room here. Again, I don't think Logan Thomas is anything, elite, obviously, but he is a solid enough tight end. Ricky Seals-Jones also a solid enough depth guy, pretty solid blocker. But can also go out and catch it. And John Bates, kind of same case with him. So you have a solid little room here. I'll give it a C+. And then a quarterback. Here's where it gets interesting. So you brought over Ryan Fitzpatrick from Miami. First off, I think he fits this Washington offense really well, because I think he's a guy that, he likes to chuck it deep, and he will be really solid for you on some weeks. I think the offensive line is definitely better here in Washington compared to Miami. Terry McLaurin, like I said, I think he'll have his best year yet, since Fitzpatrick will actually be willing to throw it up, unlike Dwayne Haskins or Alex Smith. And behind him, Taylor Heinicke, who played really well in that playoff game against the Buccaneers. I'm actually really intrigued to see him moving forward. Fitzpatrick apparently is the clear starter for right now, but, they didn't draft a quarterback, so I'd be very interested to see, potentially could Taylor Heinicke be their guy of the future? We'll have to see, but I don't think it's that far off of a bet. I mean, we've seen some really good things from him, and, even when he played for the Panthers, he always showed some really nice things, and he's just a smarter than the average unexperienced player. So I think that's a nice backup I have there, and potentially a starter. Kyle Allen, he's whatever, and Steven Montez, whatever. So the quarterback room, I mean, there's no one good here, obviously. I love Fitzpatrick, but he's too inconsistent. I don't believe he'll be the starter the whole year. I definitely think there's going to be some games where there's going to be some games where he absolutely cooks defenses, and there's going to be games where he sucks. And those games where he sucks, I think, is when we're going to see Heinicke and potentially their guy in the future. This team is the definition of a quarterback away, because to be honest, I wouldn't say there's a single hole on this entire team. There are weaker positions for sure. Obviously, if we're removing the quarterback out of the conversation, there are weaker positions, but I don't think there's a hole besides quarterback on this entire roster. And you do potentially have a guy there with Heinicke. So for right now, I'll give it a D+ because that upside, it is what's going to hold this team back ultimately. But again, maybe. And then the running back room, Antonio Gibson, he was great last year in his rookie season. I think he could be even better this year, now that Washington's going to have an actual passing game. And the depth here is also really nice as well. And J.D. McKissick, Peyton Barber, Lamar Miller all make up some very solid depth guys. They also picked up Jarrett Patterson, who was a fine pickup. But you do have a really deep room regardless, with a starter that I do like. I think he could be even better this year, again, just because he's not going to be the one carrying the main workload. And so, yeah, I mean, I like Antonio Gibson. There's nice depth here, so it's going to get a B for right now. So this offense, really solid. You've actually got a really solid offensive line with some nice depth and youth. I mean, you've got really nice depth across the board here. The receiving room is really, really deep. And you do have a guy at the top there. Again, it is about the quarterback. Like a lot of these teams, it's about the quarterback for sure. And I think with this team, part of the reason why they're a little bit higher is because, like I said, Fitzpatrick is inconsistent, but he could definitely cook a defense on certain weeks. And you do potentially have a guy there with Heineke, so that is why they do come up a bit higher. But moving on to the defense, this is arguably the best defense in the NFL. The Steelers might have the best pass rush. The Broncos might have the best secondary. But when you put both together, I mean, the Washington might have the best defense as a whole. I mean, starting off with this first defensive end room, Chase Young was incredible in his first year. I've seen a few people who, I wouldn't call it quite hating, but I've seen a few people trying to discredit Chase Young. I've seen some people compare, like, who's the guy on the Seahawks? Is it Aiden? Anyways, the rookie pass rusher this year for the Seahawks, right? I've seen some people saying, oh, he wasn't that far off in sacks. I mean, Chase Young still had a great amount of sacks, but you have to look far beyond the sacks to see how talented of a player Chase Young is. He's arguably already a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL. And I think after this year, there's going to be no doubt that he's a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL. Chase Young is a special athlete. Like, I think he's better than Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, like a lot of those more recent, top tier pass rushers we've seen out of the draft. I think he's better than all those guys. So Chase Young, that's an incredible player to have moving forward. And then the other guy really to talk about there is Shaka Toney, super athletic dude coming from Penn State. If anything, he's very solid depth. Very athletic depth to have there. So you have you have the pass rusher with the brightest future in the NFL right now, with a very athletic rookie behind him. That's going to get you an A- for right now. And that can move up to an A+, if Chase Young does take that leap, which I expect him to. And he was already solid. The defensive tackle room, this is also really solid. Jonathan Allen is, in my opinion, I'd probably have to go back and revise my list. I don't remember if he was on my defensive tackle rankings for the season, but I right now would call him a top 5 defensive tackle. He just earned himself a giant contract extension, well deserved. He is a solid, solid. He's an elite run defender. He gets pressure and pass rush, so he is a fantastic guy, one of the best in the business. Daron Payne, probably the best number 2 defensive tackle in the league. He'd be the number 1 for most teams in the NFL, so those two make up the scariest defensive tackle duo in football. Matt Ioannidis behind those guys is honestly at this point, just a really solid veteran to have behind them, and actually a really solid trade piece, because you don't need him. Because beyond those two, you also have a guy like Tim Settle, who is a solid enough number 3. So yeah, I mean, you have 4 guys there that make up the best defensive tackle room in the NFL. That's extremely scary. So you have that defensive tackle room. That's going to be an A+. I mean, it's the best in the league, in my opinion. And then at the other defensive end room, Montez Sweat. I mean, the underratedness that this guy is getting is pretty insane. Now, I do think he gets a little bit overrated by some people. Like, no, he's not a top 10 pass rusher, but he's like top 15. Montez Sweat has been putting up production like crazy and is also a very, very good run defender. Does he definitely get helped by the rest of this defensive line? For sure. But he's a guy that eats when he's being given help. There's a few guys in the NFL that I say that, and some people get confused by it. But, Kyle Trask, Nick Foles, Bud Dupree, Montez Sweat, they're all guys that, like, they'd be fine if they were by themselves, but when you put talent around them, they excel. And Montez Sweat is one of those guys. And then behind him, you picked up William Bradley King, who I think maybe not the best fit in the world, but I do love the talent and upside of William Bradley King. So just another solid piece to have to this defensive line. The Steelers are great. But in my opinion, I think Washington football team has the best defensive line in football. Not the best pass rush, but I do think they have the best defensive line. It is extremely scary. And the scariest part of it is that these guys are young. So moving on to the linebacking room, we're just going to kind of group these guys together. Linebacking room, definitely way less impressive. Your starters, Cole Holcomb, John Bostic, Jamin Davis, it's nothing to gawk at. Holcomb and Bostic are fine enough starters. Davis is an athletic freak, but is he anything else than that? We'll have to see. I do think that Washington is a good fit for him, at least. And there's really no one to even talk about behind those guys except for David Mayo, who is whatever. He's a solid depth piece. So the linebacking room, it's like, obviously not even close to as impressive as that defensive line. It is still solid. It'll get the job done at the end of the day. So it's pretty meh. There is kind of upside. I don't see a huge amount of upside for Jamin Davis, though, so it's going to be a C for me. But then we go back into the good stuff, and getting to the corner room. Kendall Fuller, Washington fans hate this guy, and I get it. He got burned. There were times where he did look bad. He was still a top 10 corner last year, in my opinion. Especially at the beginning of the year. He definitely played like it. He is still a great corner to have, obviously. There are a ton of teams in the NFL that would die for a guy like Kendall Fuller. And not to mention, across from him, they brought in William Jackson, who, in my opinion, is the second most underrated corner in football and one of the most underrated players in football, period. William Jackson he's an incredible corner. So now that you're making him the number 2 on this team instead of being the number 1, I feel like William Jackson could enjoy an elite breakout year with Washington this year, because again, he was playing really solid and was underrated a lot as the number 1 in Cincinnati. So now you're coming over here as the number 2. Yeah, I think William Jackson is going to have a fantastic year. Your slot, Jimmy Moreland probably, and he's a solid slot guy. You picked up Benjamin St-Juste, who I was not as big a fan of as a lot of other people were, but he is still a solid young option to have. And then Darryl Roberts is whatever as a depth piece. Otherwise, I don't really feel like there's anyone else here worth talking about, but obviously, the play of I think even without the best defensive line in the NFL, these corners are still really talented, obviously. But then when you give them the best defensive line in football, their play obviously gets better as well. So this corner room, I don't think it's borderline top 5 for me. Because, the first 2 guys obviously are what you have, and the rest is whatever. But you do have a really good duo there, though. And so for that, I am going to give an A-. Then a strong safety. I'm sorry, Washington fans. This is going to be a really unpopular opinion. I don't think Cam Curl is your safety of the future. I'm just, I'm not quite seeing what all these other Washington fans are seeing, but he could. But there's a lot of guys that could be the guy. I don't think Cam Curl is that guy. I think he'll be fine this year, but nothing special. You picked up Dark Force, though, who was a fine enough pickup. I think he fits the scheme pretty nicely, so it's a whatever room. Again, I don't see the upside with really either of those guys. Jeremy Reaves is Jeremy Reaves. It's going to be a D for me. I just don't see that upside. I don't see, again, Cameron Curl is not going to be bad, but it's a D for me. And then a free safety, I could see Landon Collins maybe moving a bit more into linebacker now. He's, not the best player in the world for Washington, especially anymore. He's just getting up there in age. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes down, plays more of a linebacker role, and Troy Apps steps up to be the main starter there. But regardless, if Landon Collins does kind of stay there, he's still a fine safety. I'd like him a bit more as like a box safety. And then Troy App, who knows what we'd really get from him, but he's good as a backup, but who knows as a starter. So it's kind of a bit of a question marked room, but it is still fine enough. It's good enough to get you a D plus for right now. So safety, obviously the big outlier on this team besides quarterback, but even then, again, like Cam Curl's not going to be bad. Landon Collins won't be bad. It's just the outliers, and obviously they're just not the best guys in the world. But like I said, this defense, it's extremely talented top to bottom, and in my opinion, it's the best defense in the NFL. So extremely talented, will win you games. It's still about the quarterback. And then special teams, Tress Way is a good punter. Dustin Hopkins is a good kicker. And, their special teams itself, your kick returner, I could see Diami Brown. I could see Andy Golden. Curtis Samuel. It could be different guys. Of course, Washington fans are probably going to know more than I do about who their kick returner is, but special teams itself is whatever. But yeah, so as a whole, this team, it's extremely talented. It is one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. It's one of the most complete rosters. You get yourself a quarterback, and this team is freaking scary. And once again, I have them a bit higher than some other teams because I think you could potentially have your guy here. Fitzpatrick can win you games, even if he is inconsistent. This defense is maybe the best in the NFL. In my opinion, it is. So I think this roster is very, very good. So now let's take a look at their schedule, coaching, and culture. And taking a look here at their schedule, one of the things that does help the team out as well is the fact that their schedule is not one of the harder ones in the NFL. There's a fair amount of games here that, when your roster is so good as it is, some of these games become easier. Especially teams that, have poor offenses are really going to struggle against you. The teams that you're worried about are the teams that have, really good secondaries that are going to limit the passing game, obviously, and even then you do have a solid running game, but like games like the Giants, the Falcons, Raiders, Eagles twice, Cowboys twice, even because it's a divisional game, those are always going to be even games. There's just some easier games here for a Washington squad, and this is again a team that, because they're so talented, because there's always that chance Fitzpatrick goes off and Heinicke could be your guy. There's a lot of games here that are harder, obviously, like the Chargers, the Saints, the Seahawks, the Broncos, that are way harder, but definitely winnable games. Do I think they're going to beat the Bills or the Chiefs or the Packers? No. But this is a very talented team, and when I did my Deshaun Watson trading landing spots, the top team actually was Washington. Now that might change now that Aaron Rodgers isn't getting traded. Who knows? Deshaun Watson still might not even get traded. If they by chance get Deshaun Watson, it's over. Like, this team would easily be the best team in the NFL to me. Just their roster is so incredible. We haven't talked about their coaching or culture yet. Ron Rivera is one of my favorite coaches in the NFL. To me, I extremely respect him for, his ability to do stuff with not the best things. I think he handled the situation without a quarterback in Carolina extremely well. When he got fired by Carolina, I thought that was undeserved, and when he went over to Washington, he was accepting an extremely hard task. You got to think at the time, that was when the whole controversy with the team name was going on, and the owner was in all his crap. And, this team didn't have an identity. They didn't know where they were going. They were one of the worst teams in the league. And just 2 years later, they arguably have, again, if you took away quarterback, the best roster in football. They have a winning culture, a good system, a good scheme, and they are just a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl, legit. And so for that, I extremely respect Ron Rivera. And so there's no issue there with the coaching, even beyond how, just a respectable and smart guy he is. He makes good game time decisions. He is a good offensive coach. So, I don't think there's any issues there with the coaching or culture. The schedule is on their favor. This roster is extremely talented. It is just a quarterback away. And Washington is a scary, scary, scary team. But that is my number 12 power rank team for the 2021 NFL season. If you guys liked the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We're back, and we'll get into number 11 tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.